The cameras were rolling, the lights were merciless, and the tension in the chamber was thick enough to cut. John Roberts leaned forward, his voice sharp and deliberate, slicing through the air like a blade. "Congresswoman Crockett," he sneered. "Your words may play well on Twitter, but here they sound like nothing more than noise." For a moment, the room froze. The smirk on Roberts' face lingered, a portrait of arrogance meant to humiliate. A few in the audience chuckled under their breath, their laughter brittle and mean. But then came the silence, an awful, heavy silence, as all eyes darted to Jasmine Crockett. Her hands folded calmly on the desk, her eyes locked on Roberts with a steady fire that refused to flinch. The gasps rippled through the gallery, disbelief spreading like a current. Was he really that reckless, that brazen, to take this swing live on air? Even those who disagreed with Crockett shifted uncomfortably in their seats. It wasn't just the insult, it was the dismissiveness, the attempt to erase her presence with a single mocking phrase. But what Roberts didn't know was that this confrontation was about to spiral beyond his control. The confrontation didn't erupt out of nowhere. It had been simmering for weeks, an undercurrent of disdain that finally broke the surface. John Roberts had long carried himself as the polished defender of an old guard, a man who spoke with the certainty of someone convinced. History belonged to him. For him, politics wasn't about representing the people. It was about preserving a hierarchy where his voice always carried more weight. Jasmine Crockett had entered that space with a different mission. Her rise wasn't gilded by privilege or inherited power. It was carved out of grit, persistence, and the unshakable belief that communities long ignored deserved a seat at the table. To Roberts, her very presence was a challenge. To Crockett, his condescension was an obstacle she had spent her entire life preparing to face. In the weeks before their televised clash, their exchanges had grown sharper. Roberts accused her of being performative. Crockett shot back that he was out of touch. Each soundbite ricocheted across social media, fueling the fire. By the time they walked into that chamber, the tension wasn't just political. It was personal, symbolic, generational. This wasn't a policy disagreement. It was a collision of worlds. For Roberts, the goal was to diminish. For Crockett, the goal was to represent every person who had ever been told their voice was noise. The cameras were ready. The microphones were hot. Millions were watching, waiting for sparks. And then, when the cameras rolled, Roberts made the one mistake that would define the night. John Roberts wasn't born into the spotlight. He was trained to command it. From early in his career, he navigated corridors of power with a precision that bordered on obsession. At Harvard, he excelled academically, but there was always a calculated edge to his brilliance, a desire not just to succeed, but to dominate. Those who knew him then whispered about his relentless ambition, the way he dissected colleagues' weaknesses while projecting an aura of unshakable confidence. As he moved into the political arena, Roberts' reputation grew as a master strategist. He was a man whose words were measured, whose pauses carried weight, and whose smirk could unsettle even the most seasoned opponents. But beneath that polished exterior were contradictions. While advocating for fairness and order in public, Roberts had been criticized behind closed doors for dismissing dissent, brushing aside concerns that didn't align with his worldview. Privilege followed him quietly, a legacy of networks and opportunities unavailable to most, shaping a sense of inevitability around his authority. Controversies dotted his path, moments where his decisions revealed a rigidity, a tendency to prioritize image over substance. Some colleagues admired his confidence, others feared it. To the public, he appeared untouchable, a man who could silence debate with a single sentence. Yet those closest recognized the cracks, a defensive stubbornness, a willingness to belittle. Opponents, a reliance on tradition as armor against the unfamiliar. And then there was his approach to confrontation, Roberts thrived in arenas where he could control the narrative, where he could dictate the tempo and tone. He had perfected the art of the verbal jab, the cold dismissal, the calculated insult that drew attention without consequence. Yet in his confidence, he often underestimated the resolve of those who refused to yield, assuming respect and authority were earned solely through his pedigree and experience. By the time he faced Jasmine Crockett, all of these traits, the brilliance, the arrogance, the contradict. Jasmine Crockett's path to the national stage was anything but easy. Born into a family that had faced economic hardship and systemic barriers, she learned early that the world often measures people not by their potential, but by their origins. Her childhood was marked by resilience, late nights helping her parents, navigating schools where her voice was sometimes ignored, and standing up when she saw injustice, even when it carried personal risk. Every setback became a lesson, every challenge a test of character. Education became her first battlefield. Crockett threw herself into learning with a fervor that was both disciplined and passionate. Scholarships, mentorships, and long hours of study were her armor, but she never let her accomplishments make her forget the communities she represented. She carried their struggles with her, not as a burden, but as motivation. Her identity as a Black woman, as someone who had witnessed the inequities of society firsthand, shaped her perspective and strengthened her resolve. Early in her career, she confronted obstacles that would have broken others. She faced dismissive colleagues, political gatekeepers, and the skepticism of those who doubted her ability to rise. Yet Crockett responded not with bitterness, but with dignity. Every debate, every policy proposal, every public appearance became an opportunity to show competence, fairness, and integrity. Her reputation grew as someone who could speak truth to power without losing her composure, someone who understood that credibility is forged in both action and empathy. Her journey was not just professional, it was deeply personal. Crockett's lived experiences gave her an innate sense of justice and a keen awareness of the human stakes behind every policy decision. She had been tested and she had endured. The struggles of her past were not wounds to hide, but badges of resilience that she wore quietly, yet unmistakably. By the time she faced John Roberts, Crockett had developed a rare combination of confidence and composure. She knew what it meant to be underestimated, to be dismissed, and to rise above it. Her past had instilled in her a calm power, a clarity of purpose that no verbal attack could shake. She understood that this confrontation was bigger than a single exchange. It was about representation, about giving voice to those long overlooked, about standing firm in truth and principle. And that's why, when Roberts came for her, she refused to back down. The room crackled with tension as the debate intensified. Roberts leaned forward, his voice sharp and precise, aiming each sentence like a well-aimed jab. "Your proposals may sound bold, Congresswoman, but they lack the experience to be taken seriously," he said, a faint smirk playing across his lips. Murmurs echoed through the chamber, some sympathetic to Roberts, others holding their breath for Crockett's response. Crockett remained calm, her posture steady, her eyes locked on Roberts with unwavering focus. "Experience isn't measured by years in an ivory tower," she replied evenly. "It's measured by results, by the courage to stand for people who are often overlooked." The words landed with a weight that even Roberts could not ignore. The audience shifted, sensing the power behind her composure. Roberts, undeterred, raised his voice, interrupting with a cutting remark about past missteps in her legislative record. Each interruption was designed to unnerve, to break the rhythm of her argument. Yet Crockett answered every challenge with poise, turning potential weaknesses into moments of clarity, exposing flaws in his logic while maintaining a dignified tone. The verbal blows continued, escalating with every exchange. Roberts's tone grew sharper, the interruptions more frequent, the smirk occasionally giving way to a flash of frustration. Crockett's voice, steady and deliberate, became the anchor in a storm of aggression, drawing attention to her principles and the communities she represented. Every sentence, every pause, every glance carried weight. The cameras captured it. All, the crowd leaning in, the whispers of shock, the tension that made the air feel electric. Roberts' arrogance began to show cracks, subtle but undeniable, as Crockett's calm authority countered each attempt to dominate. But Crockett had been holding back a card that would flip the entire confrontation upside down. The chamber went silent, as if the world had collectively held its breath. Roberts, sensing his dominance slipping, leaned forward again, ready to punctuate his argument with another cutting remark. But Crockett didn't flinch. She inhaled once, deliberately, letting the tension stretch for a heartbeat longer, and then spoke. "Mr. Roberts," she began, her voice steady, resonant, and unyielding, "this isn't about who commands attention in a room. It's about who listens when people are asking for justice, equity, and dignity." Each word carried weight, slicing through the performative bravado Roberts had relied on for years. The gallery leaned in. Reporters paused mid-note, and the live broadcast picked up every syllable. She continued, recounting stories of communities overlooked, of promises broken, of lives impacted by policies crafted without consideration for the vulnerable. She named the issues Roberts had dismissed, turning each of his criticisms into a mirror reflecting his own arrogance. The slow, deliberate pacing of her words allowed every point to land like a hammer, each sentence a measure of undeniable truth. Roberts's smirk faltered. A flicker of doubt crossed his eyes as the weight of her argument pressed against the facade he had carefully maintained. The audience murmured, a low hum of agreement swelling into audible support. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her composure amplified the impact, making every counterpoint sharper, every contradiction more glaring. By the time she delivered the final blow, a direct, fact-backed rebuttal to his most pointed attack, the room erupted. Applause, gasps, and murmurs collided, the chaos highlighting the precision of her strike. Cameras captured Roberts's momentary flinch, his confidence visibly shaken, as the gallery collectively processed the shift that had just occurred. Her words resonated beyond the walls of the chamber, bouncing across social media within seconds. Clips of her delivery spread like wildfire, commentary threads ignited, and supporters hailed her calm, commanding presence. Every carefully calculated attack Roberts had planned unraveled under the force of Crockett's clarity, conviction, and unwavering dignity. And as the cameras captured the stunned silence, the internet was already exploding. The confrontation ended in the chamber, but its echoes roared across the nation within minutes. Clips of Crockett's devastating counterattack spread like sparks on dry grass. On Twitter, hashtags ignited. Yas Crockett clapback, Yas Roberts shaken, and Dignity wins all trended within the hour. Memes multiplied with dizzying speed, screenshots of Roberts' faltering smirk paired with captions mocking his arrogance, gifs of Crockett's calm stare looping endlessly as users declared her the night's victor. Commentators seized on the moment. Progressive voices hailed it as a masterclass in composure under fire. Even centrists admitted the exchange revealed cracks in Roberts' carefully maintained image. Late-night hosts picked up the clip. Before the day was over, their monologues weaving humor into the humiliation Roberts had brought upon himself. Celebrities weighed in with retweets and quotes, praising Crockett's poise and reminding their followers why representation matters. On Instagram and TikTok, short edits went viral. Slow-motion cuts of her rebuttal layered with dramatic music, side-by-side comparisons showing Roberts unraveling as Crockett stayed unshaken. Each clip drew millions of views, turning a heated confrontation into a cultural event. The validation poured in, not just for Crockett, but for the people she represented. for immigrants, for working-class families, for young activists. The moment wasn't just entertaining, it was empowering. It was proof that arrogance could be dismantled, that dignity could stand its ground and win. But the real impact wasn't just online, it was in what people felt deep inside. When the noise of the chamber faded and the online storm settled into steady waves of support, Jasmine Crockett's words lingered. She hadn't just defended herself in a heated confrontation, she had reframed the entire debate. It was never about scoring points or humiliating an opponent. It was about dignity. It was about the courage to speak truth when arrogance tries to silence it. In interviews afterward, Crockett made that clear. "This isn't about me versus John Roberts," she said. "It's about whether we choose to value people's voices or dismiss them. It's about whether we meet arrogance with silence or with dignity." Her calm repetition of those themes transformed the moment from a single clash into a moral compass for a nation hungry for clarity. The lesson cut across politics. It spoke to anyone who had been underestimated, overlooked, or told their words didn't matter. Crockett's composure was proof that truth could stand steady even under attack, and that dignity was not weakness, but strength. She had turned an insult into a universal reminder. Arrogance fades, but justice endures. And because of that, her triumph was not hers alone. It belonged to every person watching who felt a piece of themselves in her resolve. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't just about Roberts versus Crockett. It was about us. John Roberts may have entered that chamber certain of his authority, certain his words would cut and silence. But what unfolded instead was a moment that no headline could capture in full, a clash where arrogance met dignity, and dignity won. Jasmine Crockett stood calm, steady, and unshaken, reminding millions that truth spoken with clarity carries more power than insults delivered with swagger. This wasn't just another political argument, it was a turning point, a living demonstration of what happens when courage stands firm against condescension, when composure dismantles mockery. Viewers saw it, they felt it, and they carried it into their own conversations, their own feeds, their own sense of what leadership should look like. The title of this story says it all. John Roberts stuns Jasmine Crockett in heated live confrontation. But the real shock wasn't his insult. It was her response. It was the way she transformed an attempted takedown into a defining victory, not just for herself, but for everyone who has ever demanded to be heard with respect. And now, the story continues with you. If you believe in dignity over arrogance, in truth over manipulation, in courage over mockery, then don't just watch this moment, share it, subscribe, add your voice, and join a movement that insists politics isn't about who speaks loudest, but who speaks with honesty and heart. Because this wasn't only about Roberts or Crockett. It was about all of us and the future we choose to build together.